Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2, and that was a lot. Fuel remains in buried rooms while they measure water blues. Early 30s, so they say, when the work might get underway. Decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim, still the Buildington stays the same. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2, a careful shot, not from 3, not from 4. Still they work around the door. Less than a gram, still asking for
Hello everybody, got a good show for you tonight. You won't believe the stuff I got. Last time I covered it was 2021, and it was about the tanks, so it'd be nice to go through that stuff again. Welcome, I'm Dana, by the way. Take care. I'll fire up here now. 709-589-4406 is the live show call-in number. Be there or be square. Got a really good show. It's a really good show. Solid. The topic tonight, of course, is treated water release at Fukushima nuclear plant passes 2-year mark. 11 of the 1,046 water tanks were dismantled to date. So they're saying there was a total of 1,046 tanks. We've counted them, by the way. The most we've seen was 750. That's being generous. That's if you include all the small ones, the hundreds and hundreds of small ones. So the reactors blew up. By day 5, this is March the 15th, day 4. And then over the next year and a half, 3 and 4 look like this. So the Fisher story is nothing got out. Less than a gram is what they got out of Unit 2 after $48 million. The idea is so you don't look at 3 and 4, which is what you're looking at here, reactor 4, reactor 3. Let's just only talk about reactor 2. Let's forget about... Reactor 2 is the one in the middle up there, between 2 meltdowns, and it melted down itself, and it burned constantly for days. So, in August 2023, just before Japan allegedly first started releasing the water from Fukushima plant, treated water, this is the official version of their version. You can't treat something that was gone by day 5, by the way. I don't know if that ever occurred to anybody. This author, Young Jong-il, is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering at KAS in South Korea. The most prestigious institution in South Korea. The 1.37 million tons of water stored at Fukushima plant includes approximately 2.2 grams of tritium. Not even tritium-3H. Must be nice. And the discharge is equal to throwing 3 grams of sugar, like throwing a sugar cube of 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. But sugar got nothing to do with a nuclear meltdown. I know that sounds crazy to the pro-nuclear community. We affectionately call assholes. Which is the poll tonight. Do you think the nuclear industry is a lunatic assholes to claim only 3 grams got out of the Fukushima reactor? That's a legitimate poll. Do you think that they're lunatic to suggest only 3 grams got out, or 2 grams got out of these buildings? Did I put in 3 grams? No, 2 grams. So, do you think it's reasonable to suggest that more than 2 grams got out of the buildings? I'm just going to wait a minute for your comments. I'm not trying to be an asshole like them. I'm asking that question. Do you think more than 2? If you believe more than 2 grams got out of the buildings, then we got a problem. You got a problem. Every insect, bird, mammal, animal, every species on the planet got a serious problem. We got a problem, and we better address it. You're running out of time. So the first video over the killer whales, then the next 4 videos, and the next couple of videos. I think there were 7 videos altogether, that we've done in the last week and a half, 2 weeks of die-offs. And the majority of videos, 2.5 hours, 2 hours 40 minutes, 2 hours 30 minutes, 3 hours. And then we've done a video on the horror show. And then Fukushima. Then the death of whales, insects, birds. Why are all species emaciated? All species of whales emaciated. There's an enormous amount of videos that are produced of documentation of post-Fukushima, all the whales, birds, and everything else is emaciated or disappeared. And I mean all of them, too. And now the emaciation is brutal. It's brutal. So, like, there's my evidence. Where's theirs? They don't provide any. And why would I get a no vote? How can you not think the nuclear industry is lunatic assholes to claim that only 2 grams got out of this building? How can you not be an asshole to suggest that? Is there anybody out there who wants to call into the show and tell me there's only 2 grams? Explain it to me. I'm a pretty reasonable guy. Explain to me how only 2 grams got out of those buildings. By the way, there's 2 more buildings that melted out too. At the top of each of the buildings were 2 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores. You realize that fucking counts, right? You realize that matters. You're talking about maybe 36 reactor cores or more are missing from 4 buildings. But the Fisher story is the total end of the spectrum. Only 2 grams got out. I'm a professor. You can trust me. He's a professor. Look, you can trust him. 1.37 million tons of water stored at Fukushima plant includes approximately 2.2 grams of tritium. Tritium doesn't come from nuclear meltdowns or nuclear reactors. It's tritium-3H. And there's a big difference. 1.37 million tons of water. 1.37 million tons of water. That part is really important too, as we get to this tonight. But here you got a professor of nuclear quantum engineering at the most prestigious institution in South Korea, and I mean, there was all the media was doing this kind of nonsense, saying the discharge is like throwing 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. 3 grams of sugar from nuclear meltdowns. Now it's equal to 3 grams of sugar because you're just a smoke or you're just an idiot, and that's how they see it. They see it like to come out and say something like that is literally walking up and spitting in your face. That's, even if you only watch The Simpsons and SpongeBob Spider-Man and the Hulk, the industry propaganda machines your entire life. You still know that's wrong. You've been brainwashed your whole life. You still know what I'm saying is true, that they're wrong to suggest that only 2 grams. Why are they suggesting only 2 grams got out of the buildings? At the nuclear meltdowns, they were infinitely larger than Chernobyl per reactor core, and they might have lost 36 reactor cores. Each reactor core is probably equal to 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a graphite, it was a brand new reactor. It was a small reactor. Each of these reactor cores in Japan are massive. Pure uranium and plutonium. There's no comparison. And Chernobyl was brutal. 9,400 farms were closed in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. They closed the freshwater fishery in Switzerland for 30 years. There was abortions and congenital malformations in children that filled up orphanage after orphanage after orphanages because of Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is nothing compared to Fukushima reactors. Do you think that 2 grams is all that got out of that building? 709-589-4406 here in Canada. Do you think only 2 grams got out of these buildings? Do you think the nuclear industry is lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of the Fukushima reactor? Yes or no? Where are you on this planet? Do you think the nuclear industry is a lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of Fukushima? Hi, everybody. And the song we started tonight, Less Than a Gram, you'll find over at James Lucid's site. That's the link to it. Just type in Less Than a Gram, and there's tons of more music there. Like the likes we've never seen on this planet ever. Do you think that this professor is right? Now, he's a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering. I'm not. He is. Do you think he's right that only 2.2 grams got out of these buildings? There's actually 4 of them, don't forget that. But just these 2 buildings alone, do you think that that's what's got out of these buildings total? It's 2.2 grams, and that is stored in 1,046 tanks. And if you do, don't be a coward. Call me here in Canada, 709. Don't be a lunatic asshole. Call me here in Canada at 1-709-589-4406. And explain to me why you think this is just a gram, and why the nuclear industry and the people that promote this narrative are not lunatic assholes. If they're not lunatic assholes, who the fuck is a lunatic asshole? Is that a legitimate question? Do you think the nuclear industry is lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of the food? Somebody doesn't, but they're afraid to call in because they're in their cubicle and they don't want to make any noise so their boss might hear them. They don't have to worry about it. Their boss is at their house banging their wife, most likely. Fukushima plume model showed 1 million atoms a square meter over the west coast after the reactor's explosion. No, Dana, it was only 2 grams and it's all in the tanks. Oh, okay. But that's a lot. You sure? No, Dana, it was like 3 grams of sugar. Oh, okay. Who are you again? You're a professor of nuclear quantum engineering. So we can't trust any university, is what you're saying. 20 million particles of iodine particles, for goodness sakes, of iodine-131 per liter on the United States and Canada. This is a Canadian study, by the way, not U.S. study. It's out of Vancouver, British Columbia, not United States. It's applicable to the United States, but it's actually a Canadian disgusting parasite study. You can't be an iodine-131 if you don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second. So officially, Chris Sarkozy says that it was equal to 10 pulses of energy a minute. And the reason is, of course, he's getting $6 million a year, he says, for the nuclear industry as a disclaimer at the end of the video. But you can't be a 131 unless you pulse energy at the speed of light every second. So that means there's 20 million pulses of energy. There's 10 times more 132 in that same sample, 30 times more iodine 133, 31 times more iodine 129. That was a separate study from Ottawa, Canada, by the way. Back that one up. But that's the ratios. And the 132 and the 133 are 10 times more effective than the iodine 131, which is unbelievably effective. And the damage is forever. It's a short isotope, but the damage is forever. And it destroys the thyroid gland of every species because there was so much of it. And it wasn't just iodines, it was xenon-133. The 220 million atoms, you got a 15 million year half-life. If they're in your body, or an animal, bird, or insect, or whatever, they're going to destroy their chromosomes, their cells, their DNA, and their blood. Your body's going to produce the white blood cells for the rest of their life, trying to fight this isotope and the energy it's using every second, and the cells that are being destroyed every second. No matter what kind of bird or animal or mammal, this will wipe out the food chain eventually, and you'll never know what happened outside of the silence from the species, because they'll disappear in the air. But officially, nothing got out. So how could you have massive amounts of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet, and I mean massive, something we've never even perceived before, but nothing got out? How does that actually work? How can you have 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools catch fire and burn constantly till they're disappeared, and nothing got out? Only 2.2 grams. And that's backed up by the International Atomic Degenerate Agency too. Equal to 3 grams of sugar into the ocean. 3 grams. 2 grams of tritium. 3 grams of sugar. These are mentally ill and lunatic assholes to say something like that. Workers say the ground under the plant is cracking and the radioactive steam is coming up. The melted core may be moving out of the building. Well, it can't be moving out of the building. It's already out of the buildings. This is the video speeded up by about 40 times. These are the lethal doses. The steam coming out of the ground was at 10 sieverts per hour in 6 places. 3 sieverts will melt your organs. These are 10 sieverts. And so everything it coated was going to leave a lethal dose there forever and ever and ever. Every branch, every piece of handrail, everything. So the site is going to be emitting absurd amount of radiation constantly. And you should be fucking terrified, and you should be upset, and you should be fucking active. Because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? New images from Fukushima Daiichi press tour. This is 2013. The building you see there is the ELP building. ELP's decontamination system under construction in 2013. They were released to the press. In 2014, almost at the end of 2014, the end of the third quarter, August, Fukushima contaminated water problem worsens. This is 4 years later. And they were hoping by 2015 to have the ELP system up and running. So do you really think that they didn't spray any water on the reactor? Do you really think that even if there was 1,046 tanks, they would have been filled within the first week? How can you pump up the radioactive water? Because the hoses would be so radioactive, nobody could ever walk down that side of the road again. You could never go near the hoses again. Even if the hoses were 3 feet thick lead, you probably still could never go near that lead again because you're sucking up fuel particles. How are you going to put fuel particles in the bottom of a tank and not have a criticality meltdown, which will drain the tank and make you run away? How can you build another tank alongside of a tank full of fuel particulates? How does that actually work? Where's the science? Where's the literature for that precedence? Because it doesn't exist. Everything goes directly into the ocean. So there was no filtration system. And what are you going to filter when it already ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools out of some of the buildings? Directly out of the buildings. How are you going to get close to that? Those are workers. Not nuclear scientists, not nuclear corporations, not nuclear academics. Workers. The homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. How can we sit in silence? And look at the censorship on me. 13 viewers and 6 likes. because I'm such a terrible person, right? Clearly, I'm a horrible person. That's all I deserve is 13 people and 6 likes on the show I've been doing for over a decade nonstop, at least 5, and for much of it, 7 days a week. On the most important topic on the planet, and I actually know my stuff really good. So it's not like I'm full of shit or I'm boring. I provide you with a relentless amount of documentation every day. Like there's so much work. And someone better get doing it. How can you look at the buildings and say that only 2 grams got out? How do you look at that and say only 2 grams got out? How do you sit in silence? How do you not understand the enormity of this equation? Where's all the big shot bloggers? Where's all the alternative media? And yes, I don't have any tolerance for scumbags and arseholes anymore. I haven't forever. I certainly don't have it at this stage. I work really hard to tell the truth. I can't handle propaganda for 2 seconds. Or, I'm sorry, 1 second. I'm not a bad person for doing what I'm doing. I have the moral high ground, unfortunately, to get upset at the fact that this planet is refusing to have a conversation. "13 viewers and 6 likes, 9 votes. Because I'm a liar, right? Who provides all the documentation for his assertions. The truth is much different than what I'm made out to be. Treated water released at Fukushima nuclear plant passes 2-year mark. 11 of the 1,046 water tanks are dismantled to date. You can't dismantle a tank full of radioactive water. The tank is radioactive. They're showing pictures and videos of people inside these tanks. It doesn't work that way. Treated water. You can't treat water. How are you going to treat something that lost its entire inventory in 5 days? How are you going to treat something when the filter becomes so radioactive you can never go near it again after 20 minutes? You can't go near the pipes after 20 minutes. You can't go in the building after 20 minutes. Water tank demolition begins. The mass of water, I see the word water, not radioactive water. You can't unradioactive tritiated water for starters. You can't untritiate water, which is radioactive water. And you can't filter the water with the radioactive particulates into it and the fuel particulates, because the filter, you put in 2 sieverts a liter and out the other side after 20 minutes coming 10, 15, 20 sieverts, because that's how a filter works. This is radiation. This is not like a filter for your house. This has got nothing to do with that whatsoever. And then you're talking about putting gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas in a filter. You really think that's not going to melt down right away? You really think the pipes are not going to have a meltdown? You really think you can separate these atoms that are all the same size and that you can put 200 million uranium atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it? And then you can put 200 million plutonium atoms on the same head of the needle, you still can't see it. You really think you can take fuel particulates and put them in a filter and not have a chain reaction? You're really that stupid? You're really that gullible? You're really that naive? You're really that manipulated, easily manipulated? Oh, don't forget water, 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 water. Water. It's called brainwashing, what you're looking at there. You don't see radiation. Just water. So subconsciously, if I don't highlight that, you won't even notice how many times water appears. So we're going to go through that story slowly. This is reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the 15th, but only 2 grams got out, Dana. Don't worry though, it's in 1,000 tanks. They're dismantling the tanks. 200 trillion becquerels a kilogram in fuel rod material near Tokyo. The material spread globally, but only 2 grams got out. And none of these stories you're going to see is going to be talking about tritium. We're talking about every other isotope. The Fisher story is nothing got out, and whatever it was just tritium, and not even tritium-3H. The material spread globally, composed major part of the worst Fukushima plume, persisted for a long time in living organisms, and must reconsider the disaster's health effects. 35.8% of the Fukushima children had thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. 13,646 out of 38,200. It used to be 1 in a million, which means you're talking about 358,000 out of a million, when it used to be 1 in a million before Fukushima. And a thyroid tumor means not just a cancer. Their thyroid gland is only 2 by 3 centimeters. So a 2 centimeter tumor on their thyroid gland is only 2 by 3 centimeters. It's a big ass tumor. And that means they're producing radioactive hormones as they're developing. Do you get it? The plume had 1 million atoms a kilogram, or per square meter. 20 million particles of iodine-131. This is just 3 different sets of isotopes. You can extrapolate so much more because you have a number to work with. Right? There's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. We know the cesium ratios. The cesium numbers had 1 to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air, pre-Fukushima numbers. And you're going to be looking at a 100 to 1 ratio of strontium-90 for every cesium. The Japan news. Treated water released from the Fukushima. 11 of 1,046 water tanks were dismantled to date. This is not treated. You can't treat it. You didn't even have your god, the ELP system, which is laughable. Let me explain that to you. It's absurd that that story showed up today. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm getting there. I was hoping so. There we go. So let's go back to 2013 for a minute. November 27, 2017. That's the wrong one. Right here. August the 20th, 2013. Mary Yamaguchi, no less. The tank at crippled Fukushima plant leaks highly radioactive water. Tanks. Hundreds of storage tanks. The worst leak yet for such a vessel. They said there was 1,000 steel tanks in 2013. 1,000 steel tanks. You know how many they got today? Allegedly, they got 1,046, was it? 2014, the next year, Mari Yamaguchi no less, there's 1,200 tanks. In 2017, was 900 tanks. Second sentence, 900 large and densely packed tanks. These weren't large tanks. Try walking with both heels on the ground. If the tanks were full, you couldn't build another tank alongside of it. You realize that, right? September 2019, they had 1,000 tanks. In this line right here at the very beginning, 1,000 tanks. 2023. 2019, I'm sorry. In 2021, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2020, Mary Yamaguchi, in 2023 or 2024, I forget, 1,000 tanks in early 2024. In 2025, they got all of a sudden an extra 46 tanks. The release should be delayed. Some scientists say water used to cool the reactors accumulated in 1,000 tanks. Water above 1 sievert per hour. That was going into the ocean for 2 years straight. Above 1 sievert per hour. It's much worse than that on top of that. 1 sievert is, if you have a couple of liters, then that's a lethal dose just walking by it. If that goes into a filter, after about 10 or 15 minutes, you can never get near the filter again. You can never change the filter. You can never get in the building. You can never go around the pipes or the filtration system, which is all pipes. You can never go near that again. There are lethal doses. Your organs will melt. It doesn't matter how brave or stoic you are. You're a dead man. Japan professed 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the Pacific Ocean. Like, calling it contaminated doesn't do it justice. And you can see the little small tanks. That's some of the tanks they're counting. That's important to keep in mind. Bear with me. So you can see all of these small tanks right there, and up by the 100, all those small tanks. And over in the right-hand corner, to my right here, you'll see the small tanks right there. That's part of the tanks they're talking about. But you need a dozen of them to make up for one of those big tanks. So they're very dishonest in saying 1,000 tanks. And I must have 1,000 pictures on these tanks. And I created at least 5,000 pictures to make up for the 150,000 sites we don't have pictures of the 1-ton bags, rather. So they're counting the small tanks, and the numbers are still only at less than 750 tanks. Because it just keeps going straight into the ocean. Okay. So the filtration system, there was different filtration systems that they sold to you. So the ELP system had yet to function reliably in 2014. It wasn't even built in 2014. I showed you that earlier. In August of 2014, they were hoping to have it finished in 2015. There was no filtration system. The Arriva system, which was built and finished in August of 2014, was abandoned because when you turned it on, you couldn't go near it ever again. The radiation levels measured in the system posed a risk to workers during operation and maintenance. Not a risk, it just couldn't work, and that was the reason why. They didn't even use it. Right, and we got many headlines acknowledging that. And, like, I got a story coming up here tonight of millimeters. There's 1,000 millimeters in a liter. Milliliters, rather. There's 1,000 liters in a liter. And it was at 75 million atoms of cesium per milliliter. There's 1,000 liters, so you can multiply by 1,000 to get what's in a liter. These are frightening numbers. 100 million atoms, Becquerel. A Becquerel is the atom pulsing energy. So that explosion is called a Becquerel. And that'll destroy chromosomes and DNA in cells and cause permanent lesions to your organs or birds or mammals or animals in a very short order, by the way, and that's permanent lesions to your organs. TEPCO says the bypass operation is not having effect 2014. So they were going to block the water coming down the mountainside and then pump it directly into the ocean so it didn't run through the site, and create more radioactive water. They admit the groundwater bypass operation are failing. And they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation will have any tangible effects on groundwater levels. No, because you're just drilling wells, basically, and catching water coming down the mountain. It's the most ineffective thing you could do. TEPCO failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence. How can you build a fence to stop radiation, not from leaking into the ocean? Because you got to remember the buildings were completely destroyed. So the fence on the coastline didn't work. Pumping water around the site didn't work. The Arriva system, the ELP system, the Ceres system, Curry system with a K didn't work. You can't separate atoms with one of those spinners, right? You need tens of thousands of spinners just to make enough for a bomb. Imagine how much you need to do filtration. You need millions and millions and millions. TEPCO ice wall operation not working. Why would you build an ice wall? What kind of bird brain idea was it to build an ice wall? Why wouldn't you build a real wall? The radioactive fallout covered the whole country, but only 2 grams got out. They allegedly had 260,000 people working on creating a wall, but only 2 grams got out. 260,000 people worked on making an ice wall because 2 grams might have got out. Why would you want that technology on your planet for, if that was true? The buildings are completely gone. And the fuel pools with decades of reactor core gone. There was 865,000 cancers in the first year. Do you really think everybody got health care? You really think everybody was diagnosed? 865,000 extra cancers, but nothing got out, only 2 grams. And don't worry, it's in the tanks. EU Energy Commissioner called it appropriately. Fukushima is an apocalypse, and everything is out of control. France said Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. And you can't get much more pro-nuclear than France, degenerate France. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. So your country after country getting at it, but there's only 2 grams got out. And don't worry, it was only tritium and it's in 1,000 tanks, Dana. Tokyo has lost almost all control of events at Fukushima. Don't worry though, there's only 2 grams got out, and thank goodness they cut all this other stuff that got out and they put that somewhere else. But there was only 2 grams of tritium and they're taking care of that. You got any idea what kind of crazy story that actually is? This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. But don't worry, because only 2 grams got out and we got it all in 1,000 tanks. You know, I showed you the videos earlier that I'd done in the last 2 weeks of the die-offs. There's 7 long videos of emaciated whales like you've never seen in your life if you haven't seen my material. South Korea called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent, which is pretty polite, actually. The treated water past the 2-year mark. So nothing got out of there. Only what they released starting August 24, 2023. That's it. Nothing else got out of there. How can nothing get out of there? How can they retrieve everything? How can they recover everything? How does that work? Fukushima Reactor 3 doesn't exist anymore, neither does Reactor 4. This is never counted. Neither one of these buildings are acknowledged as being destroyed, even though these are TIPCO. You can go to TIPCO and download these pictures. You go to IAEA and read their stories and download these pictures. But officially now, since August the 24th, 2023, this never happened. Rafael Grossi from the International Degenerate Agency, IAEA, went to Japan a couple of days before that and picked up a $19.3 million check. And he jet set it down to Taiwan, hung out in a 5-star hotel. And he sauna and got a massage and drank a $5,000 bottle of wine and went out and told the population that it was only tritium. And they went out and protested in the street, please don't release tritium into our ocean. And the media was like, oh, this is so wonderful, these nuclear activists are protesting tritium. We got to put them up on TV and all the newspapers so we can create more protesters protesting tritium instead of protesting nuclear meltdowns and the emissions that have been going on for 14 years. Instead of shoving your heads up your arses and actually pretending this is not going on and dealing with it. You really think they're hiding this for something to do? Treat it. Treat it, and you guessed it, treat it. Everything's treated, and everything's water. Treated water, not radioactive fuel particulates, starting to be released into the ocean from Tokyo Electric Power Company on August the 24th, 2023. We cover that constantly. Let's look at the other side of that equation. Doomsday-like radiation released. If fire in the pool at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. It already has been. No, ongoing monitoring of the surrounding water in the 2 years has uncovered no abnormalities whatsoever. And the concentrations of radioactive material. We covered Taiwan last night. Taiwan said they checked over 260,000 samples and never, ever, not a single time, in 14 years found radiation in food that was out of their limits. It's insanity. So you can't trust a single university, you can't trust a single media or government agency on the entire planet. You are in so much trouble. You have no concept. Massive radioactive releases of Fukushima going on for 3 years. Don't worry, there's only 2 grams got out. And they got that in 1,000 tanks, ain't it? Oh, okay. The visible radio, and I showed you the video, lethal doses of over 10 seabirds at 6 places. Containment vessels are broken. Fukushima is very bad. We have a crew in Japan. Reports are coming out, the government covered it all up. It wasn't just the government, your media, man. They made a fortune cutting your throats. Food around the whole region got irradiated, poisoned. And when you ate it, you got cancer and heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. Increased problems for people in Tokyo. Really scares me I don't hear anyone discussing how to stop it. It scares me that you don't hear anybody just acknowledging it. Nuclear expert, Fukushima reactor core melted right down into the ground. It's getting washed directly into the Pacific Ocean. No, it's like a banana, like a potato chip. It's like walking in sunshine. James NASA, I can't even remember his name. My goodness. Hansen. Oh, too bad. I was hoping I forgot NASA's name. Just let me try to rationalize what they're telling you. Nothing got out, only 2 grams. Research of pollution may be causing, Fukushima pollution may be causing radioactive fallout, not pollution, may be causing sea star epidemic on the west coast. Sea urchins, sea cucumbers. Something's making them susceptible starfish use the ocean as we use blood. So if the radiation is in the ocean, and it is, oh boy, is it ever, then it's going to immediately affect, they melted, It's not like anything we've ever seen. Population goes locally extinct overnight. It's the blob, right? It's the radioactive fallout. Comes along the coastline and just suffocates everything with radioactive fallout. Alarming West Coast sardine crash likely radiating through the ecosystems. 2014. Experts warn that the marine mammals and seabirds are starving. Boats return without a single fish. Fukushima plant is out of control. The fuel is now in the ground. No way they can get at it. We'll just wash uranium out to the ocean. The pollution of the Pacific Ocean to continue more or less forever. 2014. So when you look at these buildings, when you look at reactor 4, and say there was 6 million pounds there, would it be safe to say at least a couple of more grams besides 2 got into the building? Especially when the fuel pulls reactor cores at the top of these 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings. Does the building to your left look like it's destroyed? Or am I just being picky? Remember, that building right there should be a 19-story building, a 19-story apartment building. Think of a 19-story apartment building. Does that building look destroyed to you that's left, that part of the building, the stump of reactor 4? The fuel pool was at the top of the building. That hole you see up there is the elevator shaft, where they used to lower the cast down to a special designed truck. Does reactor 3, which was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor, does that look destroyed? Do you think there's a possibility more than 2 grams got out of that? Remember, this is a 190-foot building you're looking at, so you're quite far away, this picture. But because they're so big, it doesn't look that way. They're 150 feet wide. They're 150 foot squared, and they're 19 stories, 190 feet tall, 65 meters tall. And the reactor core and the fuel pools, decades and decades of reactor cores were at the top of the buildings, they're gone, and the fuel pools and the reactor core still had a huge amount of fuel rods into it because they were changing the fuel and doing maintenance. They never, ever, they weren't rebuilding the plant, they were doing a fuel change, which requires around 11,000 maintenances. There's around 11,000 things they got to do. Unlike geothermal, will just run for 50 years, and then you build a new one alongside of it, and when that one is turned off, you recycle it all to build another one somewhere else. Nuclear doesn't have those attributes. Water tank demolition. The government of TEPCO must keep seeking broad understanding from the international community. Understanding. They must go along with Japan and pretend that never happened, and that never happened, and reactor 1 and 2 never happened, and the fuel pools didn't melt down. They don't show you pictures like I'm showing you. They don't show you any pictures. It's pretty rare for us to do a story with pictures in it from Fukushima. The government of TEPCO must keep seeking broad understanding from the international community that the ocean discharge is an essential part of the decommissioning work. Why do you have to put it in the ocean? The idea, see, was to trick you. And so it's already in the ocean. They never stop pouring into the ocean. They can't contain it and they can't filter it. But they have 1,000 tanks. They want to get rid of that. And they can't keep the law telling, indoctrinating the next generation of administrations to not tell the truth. And they can't take a chance on it, right? So they need to get rid of the tanks. So a lot of people are compartmentalized. They think the tanks are full. There's lots of people like that. That's working there and in the industry. You don't have to trick everybody. You just got to trick a few people, and the media will do the rest for you. Fukushima is the most important issue going on in the world. Everyone should stop what they're doing and work together. Because there's 2 grams might get out, but don't worry right now because it's all in 1,046 tanks, right? Newspaper editor, the government's afraid to look into Fukushima. It's going to lead to the destruction of the fishing industry. It's going to lead to the destruction of it anyway. On the West Coast. United States and America and Canada. Pitiful. Fukushima plume hitting West Coast Alaska any day now. No government agency is monitoring the ocean. The public has a right to know. We have to watch the seafood and the food web over the future. Did they do that? No. Did we do it? Yes. 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean doing research expeditions. California seafood is tainted from Fukushima disaster. Anything from San Diego to Alaska was removed. It's easy for people to be convinced there's no harm now. That's part of the problem. It's easy to convince people that never happened. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. A second radioactive plume headed to California. Levels to rise for years. It's a health and safety issue, yet no one's testing. Nuclear expert, this is just the first radioactive wave hitting the United States and Canada, 2014. It never stopped. And the plume covered the planet right away. That's the plume in less than 30 days, 25 days, 26 days, covering the entire planet. No sign it will stop anytime soon. The plant is unstable, potentially worse than Chernobyl. How can it not? Like, each reactor was equal to 800 Chernobyls. They had around 8 or 9 reactor cores in each building. Each reactor core is pure uranium, pure plutonium. These buildings are gone. They lost their entire inventories. The ocean discharge is an essential part of the decommissioning work. Why not dig a hole and put it there? Why does it have to go into the ocean? Because fishermen are stupid. And the denial is what they've always done. They've never done anything else only denial. And Fukushima, they control the media. They control all of the media. $7,000 humpback whales extra on top of an unusual mortality event. They so many starved to death, and blaming it on the heat wave, it was the Fukushima plume. Broke the food chain. And the ocean heated up because of that. Climate change likely played a role in 40% drop in Pacific gray whale population. It's 52% now. That was 2022. It's not climate change, which is radioactive fallout for 80 years from the nuclear industry. 80 years of making perpetual snowstorms of radioactive fallout that never goes away and pulses energy at the speed of light every second. That's what climate change actually is. Carbon doesn't pulse energy, and they certainly don't pulse it at the speed of light, and the plumes don't cover the planet. The only plumes that are anthropogenic, that covers the entire planet consistently, is man-made radiation. You got all the gray whales are emaciated, and then some. You got all the humpback whales are emaciated. You had over 1,000 covert beak whales showed up in the United Kingdom a few years back, and just a single year, which meant 50,000. 10,000 of them died. You only find 10% at best. In different stages of decomposition, and the ones that were healthy enough were severely emaciated. All the humpbacks were emaciated. All the gray whales last year were emaciated, and the migratory runs south. They're brutal. You can see their skeletons going north for 12,000 miles. No surviving babies last year. They only had 80 babies out of the 13,000 left. 14,000 died post-Fukushima that they acknowledge. Out of a population of 27,000, 13,000 are skeletons. You can see their rib cages, their shoulder blades, their peanut heads, their spinal column. From the shoreline, it's distinct. It's severe emaciation, a life we've never heard tell of. The food chain is broken. And because they're the phytoplankton eaters, for instance, the grays, their bioaccumulation of radiation, they have radiation sickness. They're not able to uptake nutrition even if they do find food. But the ones that are showing up dead, severe emaciation, are always empty stomachs. They can't eat. They have radiation sickness. The massive water tank clustered on an elevated area at the plant's ground were a striking sight when viewed from an airplane in mid-August. Water tank demolition begins. You can't take apart the tanks. The tanks are so radioactive. If you take a square foot of it to a subway and put it in the wall, the majority of people who walks past it for 1,000 years will die. You can't go in that tank and cut it up like they're showing you. It's physically, your organs will melt. It can't be done. They don't, and like, it means the tanks were empty. Now, we do believe a few years back they filled them up with fresh water, fresh seawater. And the reason they done it was because they had an earthquake where 50 tanks shifted. And 50 tanks shifting looks really bad. Because people start to wonder, oh, maybe they're empty. And they were. You can't contain the water from a nuclear meltdown. You can't pour water down on that, and the water that's coming up, vacuum it up. You can't go near the hoses ever again. If you do that for 2 minutes, and you take the hose and you put it in the lunchroom, everybody that goes in that lunchroom will die that day for the next 1,000,000 years. Radiation is not something you can just rinse off and everything's hunky-dory again. TEPCO released new data related to the white smoke at the Fukushima Daiichi unit. TEPCO, of all people, a non-decommissioned authority. They don't know nothing about it. They're an operator. They don't build the reactors. They're not nuclear scientists. Why would we, for 1 second, want to hear their narratives? This is you lost the entire inventories of 40 years from the fuel pools and the reactor cores, which was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. It ejected the reactor core to the building. Some of it went down into the building. And they're spraying water down there. And this plume, if you swing through it like Tarzan, you'll drop dead. You won't come out the other side. The utility revealed the existence of data related to a period between March the 15th and April the 3rd, 2011, which until this point was undisclosed. On March the 16th, NHK reported that white smoke had risen from the Daiichi Unit 3 reactor building, and rising radiation levels caused the evacuation of workers on site. These are not workers, these are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. If they were scientists or nuclear academics or nuclear company, they would have given them some prominence. The billowing white smoke, which is lethal radioactive fallout, was caught on camera by an NHK helicopter 30 kilometers away. And we got that video, by the way. Almost an hour later, radiation levels at the plant then dramatically jumped from 20 microsieverts to 80 microsieverts, really. It was over 1 million sieverts, not microsieverts, but sieverts. Suggesting that it went from 20 lousy microsieverts, there's 1,000 microsieverts in a friggin' millisievert, and there's 1,000 millisieverts in a sievert. And 3 sieverts alongside of you is a lethal dose. It'll melt your organs. Suggesting that a plutonium mixed oxide reactor, first off, the radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. But you're talking about ejecting 9 reactor cores out of a building. And to suggest for even a millisecond that was equal to 20 microsieverts to 80 microsieverts is an absurd insult. It's just unconscionable that somebody would even write something like that. Whoever it is, they should be found and arrested and jailed. Unfortunately, it's not illegal to be a monster in the nuclear industry and tell you lies. TEPCO sent out their messengers to gather as many workers, homeless, bring us the living dead, people no one will miss. Bring us the living dead, people that no one will miss. But don't worry, because only 2 grams got out, Dana. You have any idea how dangerous this industry actually really is? Bring us the homeless, the living dead, people no one will miss. That's what they call the workers, by the way. Does that sound like the academic community? Does that sound like scientists? Does that sound like journalists? Does it? How can bring us the living dead? Bring out your dead is more like it. Someone would explain to me how only 2 grams got out of this buildings and then was put into 1,000 tanks. Bring us the living dead, and people nobody will miss. Because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing an airplane. How can you... And by the way, both of these buildings, they refuse to acknowledge this happened to them. Why do you think they're doing that? Why do you think all the media is doing that? Why do you think all the universities is doing that? Because it's an extinction event. Do you think the nuclear industry is a lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of Fukushima reactor? I got 11 likes and 17 votes. We're killing it again tonight. I've been streaming for an hour and I got 11 likes, really. How petty is this industry at all? How incredibly pathetic is this industry? Does the industry really think I'm a bad person? Do the people that are censoring me really think I'm a bad person? They really don't think that I got their best and their children. I'm trying to protect their children and their friends and their families. TEPCO is hoping equipment will bring the radiation and contaminated water below the levels for release into the sea. 2012. 2012. What equipment? There was no Siri, there was no Curry, there was no Alps, there was no Arivas, water filtration facilities, even in 2015. And recent flyovers revealed thousands of tanks to store contaminated water lined in sprawling masses across the site. And we showed you there was no filtration. They built all the tanks in 2013. The tanks were all filled, by the way, according to Rupert Winfield Hayes in 2013, because you pumped up the aquifer below the site. Right? Remember that? Less than a gram, that's what they say. Evil is real. It's called the pro-nuclear. They're just insidious people. They're unconscionably evil. Nothing got out on a gram, Dana. Here's the media. Thousands of tanks. There wasn't thousands of tanks. There was 1,000. I showed you all of that earlier, by the way. Contaminated water accumulating at the Fukushima Daiichi poses a problem for TEPCO 2012, March the 13th, 2 days after the first anniversary. Water is crucial to the continued safety and stability of the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. TEPCO is still injecting hundreds of thousands of gallons into the reactors every day to keep them from overheating. Yeah, and they're on top of that building. TEPCO got the journalists, the major medias. I'm going to play that video.
My understanding is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
That's ABC Cecilia Vega behind me. How many people thinks that they're 150 feet above the stump to your left? Anybody? Anybody want to piss me off and put that in the comment section? Say yes, Dana. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So the reason they're doing that is because they lost everything. It's not in 1,000 tanks. It's not 2 grams. You think only 2 grams is what got out of that building to your left? Contaminated water accumulating at the Fukushima Daiichi poses a problem. Okay, hundreds of thousands of gallons into the reactors every day. Let me just do some math. There's the mighty calculator. We got some great stuff starting now. From here on in, we got some amazing stuff. Hundreds of thousands. How are you going to inject anything into a building that doesn't even exist? Hundreds of thousands. So, well, hundreds of thousands, say 300,000 a day. 300,000 gallons. Right? Or 400,000. Let's say 300,000, which is the capacity of one of the tanks. So you fill all the tanks up in 3 years at that rate, right? If you can. 300,000 gallons. So let's divide that by, Japan is 2,200 pounds a ton. Oh, Dana. That's 136 tons. That's equal to a garden hose. That's what a garden hose does each day, a 3/4 inch garden hose. It's about 140 tons, 145 tons at 30 pounds per square inch. So they're spraying the equivalent of a garden hose on 4 reactors. So they got a garden hose split 4 ways, and so you take a 3/4 inch garden hose, which is about that big, like a garden hose. And that's 140,000 tons a day. I'm sorry, 130 tons a day. So split that garden hose 4 ways, and then each one is what they're spraying on these reactors. So there's 4 reactors, right? So they have a garden hose split 4 ways, so it's equal to less than your pinky. And that's what they're spraying on each of these reactors. And some of them are at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Does that sound reasonable or rational to anybody? The reactors typically need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute, 6.45 million tons a day, 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks in 24 hours. Does that sound fucking reasonable to anybody? They're going to be spraying on each reactor a hose the width of my pinky? When it actually needs each reactor, not just... Some of the water is recycled. Let me go backwards. Contaminated water is currently estimated to be leaking out of the reactor at a rate of 10,000 tons a month. 10,000 tons a month. Cleaning it up and storing the excess is a constant challenge. So what do you mean leaking out of the reactor? If you're putting in 140 tons a day, which is equal to 4 reactors getting the equivalent of a pinky-sized garden hose at 30 pounds per square inch sprayed on them. I can assure you there's a lot more water than that. The reactors typically need 4,500 tons a minute, not a month. So 2 minutes, you almost got 10,000 tons. Each reactor would typically need that. Cleaning up and storing the excess is a constant challenge. But what they're doing is they're trying to give you these little numbers and then saying some of the water is recycled as a coolant. How can you recycle water you're pouring over a nuclear meltdown? How can you pour that back in again? You can't, like, what they got done around the site is they got wells drilled, like 100 and 200 wells around the site. And they got pumps that automatically pump water up when the water rises in the well, there's a float switch. That'll trigger the pump. But of course, electronics don't work in that environment, by the way. But that's their story. Is they got a like a bilge pump, right, with a float. And when the water rises to the float, it'll pump out 10, 20, 30, 100 gallons, and that'll go into the tank. And this is stuff that was poured over the reactor core, ran through the site towards the ocean. They caught it along the way with these wells. Originally, the idea of the wells was to take samples and then test it for radioactivity so they knew what was heading into the Pacific, because they couldn't contain it, and they can't contain it, and they didn't contain it. But the problem with the story is you're talking about fuel particulates, so if it gets around electronics, it'll kill it right away. So those pumps are not working. Some of the water is recycled as a coolant, so this is to justify the lack of storage and beat down the numbers. And they got many different ways. We had to dump all of this in the water or dump that in the water to make way for more radioactive water. So I got a 5-gallon bucket of cyanide, and somebody shows up with 10 gallons of cyanide. I should dump out my 5 gallons. Narratives. Some of the water is then, it goes through a processing facility so that the radioactive substances are removed to a certain extent. There is no, in 2012, the first year, like, there is no such thing as a filtration system that does that. There's nothing that does that. It's going straight into the ocean. And it's a hell of a lot more than 10,000 tons a month, I can tell you that much. I would imagine that's what they're doing today. They typically need 4,500 tons a minute, so 2.5 minutes would typically be over 10,000 tons. Some of the water is recycled as a coolant. This is simply not true. All the water is going directly into the ocean. If you put it in the tank, you're going to have a meltdown. The tank then will release all this incredible radioactive material, fuel particles all over that area. You can't get back on the site. It has to go into the ocean. That doesn't mean that it's, if we couldn't have come up with a solution if we didn't cover up what they done. If they didn't cover it up, some of the water is then recycled as a coolant is absurd to suggest. This was just meant to mitigate the numbers they got to try to cover up eventually. And the dumping in the ocean is the cover-up story. So you get rid of the evidence that it never ever happened eventually. And even if it was true, the scumbag, degenerate, hideous monsters don't own the ocean and have no right to do what they're doing to the ocean. They have no legal rights. They just have the United Nations with 195 militaries at their beck and call. And the remaining portion is placed in tanks at the site. Simply not true. Too bad lying is not a crime in the nuclear industry. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. That's where we're in so much trouble, because it's not illegal to destroy you and your friends and your families and your loved ones with radiation. It's not illegal. The Congress and the Parliament and the Diet in Japan doesn't have the authority to make it illegal. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has that authority. Just bear with me. They have two incinerators on the site, by the way, that are burning radioactivity. Okay, hang on. We're going to have to do another show tomorrow night on this stuff, right? Because tonight we're covering really old stuff, which is very cool. It's the coolest of cool. The information you get tonight, and you're going to continue to get for the rest of the show, is going to be it's very important stuff. Okay, so that's not it. It's right here somewhere, bear with me. In 2013, the BBC put out a video of Rupert Winfield Hayes making a claim that he was at the Fukushima site and that all the tanks were filled from an aquifer under Fukushima. TEPCO acknowledges they had no control over the site. Just give me a second, I'll find it. Should have been right there in that pile. But my pile gets bigger and bigger every day, so we might be struggling. Let me try one more. Oh, that's the wrong one. I'll find it, just bear with me. We need the video to tell the story, so we gotta find it. Won't take me long. The thing is, if I blink, we'll miss it, right? So no blinking. No blinky. Oh, we're in the right neighborhood. The big problem is I just never stop adding to the pile of oh shit stuff. There she blows. That's shocking. I should never have a hard time finding that. Did you notice that my the preamble in my shows, the video doesn't work? I didn't know that. The video doesn't work. Because you can put in these little short videos for your preamble if it's a couple hours, right? And I've been changing it to videos recently. I noticed it's not working. Okay, so this is the BBC. TEPCO is going to be in the video saying they have no control of the water in 2013, and no control. Rupert Winfield Hayes is going to tell you the 1,000 tanks on the site are filled with water from the aquifer underneath the melted reactors. It's incredible radioactive stuff. And so they put it in the tanks, the proverbial 1,000 tanks.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
Now, I played another video of Rupert Winfield Hayes saying he was on top of reactor 4, which doesn't even exist. You got TEPCO saying they have no control. You got BBC saying 1,000 large tanks, and he's showing you small ones, which I showed you earlier, which is part of the inventory they suggest is 1,000. It's clearly not 1,000. 1,000 tanks were built so they can use that number. But officially, we can only find around 750. And it's a crazy story. It's a very convoluted story. Since mid-June, it's estimated cesium activity has increased by 15% due to fuel decay products. Cesium increased by 15%. Well, for every cesium-137, there's 100 times strontium-90. The water problem isn't one that will go away soon. TEPCO has to keep constantly smothering the nuclear reactors with water for cooling until the melted fuel is removed for thousands of years. TEPCO will not be able to fix all of the leaks. TEPCO shouldn't exist. They're not a decommissioned authority. Right? They're administration. They know nothing about this. Why were they left in charge? Why would you do that? Why would you bring in all the academics worldwide? Why does the technology even exist with those attributes? TEPCO will not be able to fix all the leaks until the fuel is removed, which means that for now, no alternative methods will stem the contaminated water from continuing to pile up. It will take 6 years to plug the leak and 25 years to remove the fuel. Of course, this is ludicrous to suggest that he's ever going to come close. The treated water released at Fukushima plant passed 2-year mark. Back to that story. The demolition of empty tanks began in February with 11 fully dismantled. You can't dismantle a radioactive tank. And water undergoing treatment. You can't treat it, as I showed you all the documentation earlier. It doesn't work that way. You can never get near the filter after 20 minutes. You can never get near the pipes that are carrying it, or the hoses or anything else. You can't dismantle these tanks if they're full of radioactive water, and by proxy radioactive sludge and radioactive fuel particulates. Even if you were, and they can't remove it anywhere else, how can they remove it at Fukushima, the material? They can't filter it anywhere else, how could they filter it at Fukushima if they can't do it anywhere else on the planet? We're killing our planet. And I've done 7 videos of the die-offs, and they're counting the small tanks up there as big tanks. TEPCO constructed 1,000-ton capacity tanks, 1,000 ton. These are not 1,000-ton tanks, by the way. These are right, these are not tons or 1,000-ton tanks at all. Not even close to it. These are 100,000-ton tanks. Dana, no, there's 1,000,000-ton tanks, Dana. It's about 300,000 gallons in a tank. The big ones, the small ones, don't get jack shit. The government decided in 2021 to release the treated water. You can't call it treated water. Into the ocean at a concern. They got concerned that the land available for the tanks would run out. So build somewhere else. Like, what kind of statement is that? So say you got a garbage site, and then the garbage site has been in operations for quite a long time, and now it's got garbage everywhere. And you got this much land, you got 100 acres or 50 acres, whatever. So everything's full of garbage. And so do you get concerned now that you're running out of space for more garbage from your community, so you just take it out and dump it somewhere? Or in the ocean, or whatever the case may be? Because garbage is nowhere near as toxic as radioactivity, by the way. And there's nobody to hold them accountable. The controlled opposition, like Greenpeace, and Arnie Gunnison, Helen Kellercott, and Christopher Busby, are there to lull you over there so you don't listen to someone like me. And they look very professional. They work at the universities, they got access to all the medias, they got endless budgets, they're very well spoken, very well dressed. They don't do jack shit and they lie to you, and they don't show any documentation. They just sing you a lullaby that'll put you in a complacency mode, and then they move on to the next stupid one that they can find. They're concerned. In order to keep it stable, the estimated 880 tons of radioactive debris at the plant Water must be continuously poured over it. And that narrative has been around a long time, haven't it? 880 tons. You eject the fuel pools and the reactor cores right out of the site. The material is no longer in the buildings. They're either deep underground or they covered the entire planet and all of Japan. I mean, the tsunami, when it was going up, was covered in brutal radioactive fuel pellets and fallout. However, the water becomes contaminated as a result. Around 110,000 tons of treated water. See, refusing to calling it what it is a sign of deception on the highest scale. Water, water, water. Oh, don't forget about the water, water, water. And so subconsciously, because you can't see this subconsciously, it doesn't stand out the same way. But this is what your brain goes, right? It just goes along with it because water is everywhere your subconscious is looking, but you're not paying attention. But your subconscious is seeing all of this. I think they used it 22 times, was it? I can't remember. It's at the top of the page where you can barely see it. I think it's 22 times. Rainwater and groundwater seeping into cracks of the reactor buildings. Really, it's going to seep into cracks in the reactor buildings. I can't see where it can get in personally. That's just fear-mongering. Are you fear-mongering? Are you a fear-monger? Well, clearly water's seeping into the cracks. My goodness, Dana. Any idiot can see that. Less than a gram. Yeah, there was only 2 grams got out of all the reactors and the fuel pools, Dana. Don't worry though, it's tritium and it's in the 1,000 tanks. So they're calling me a fearmonger because I disagree with them. And unlike everybody else, I'm showing the documentation. Why not show the documentation? Anybody can take, like if you're using a phone, just turn the camera on, get a picture of this. And then when you're talking about it, show that and say, look, you know, that's the way to get results. Do you think nuclear industry is a lunatic assholes to claim that only 2 grams got out of all these melted reactors? Is that unrealistic for me to ask that question? Don't worry, because it's like a banana. It's like being on an airplane, eating potato chips, sitting along a banana with a granite rock on a granite counter. That makes sense. Rainwater and groundwater seeping into cracks of the buildings. Gee, I don't know what they're talking about. Seeping in, is it? Seeping. Do you know how much water they get you under typhoons? I love this. This is the United States has 70 identical reactors. And then if you watch their videos, you go to CBS and CNN and look at the Reactor 4 propaganda. That's Rupert Winfield Hayes up there the same year, 2013, as he said, all the tanks were full. Then a few months later, he's saying he's on top of Reactor 4 to your left, 150 feet above it. I made that picture over a decade ago. And for some reason, I'm still talking about it today, and I'm the only one showing it. I'll never comprehend that one. You heard like fake news. How about that? Is that not the ultimate fake news story? I played the video over the years to a number of people, and they didn't get it. They're like, I gotta go mow the lawn. All the species are emaciated. All your loved ones are dying of brutal cancers we've never seen before. Yeah, I gotta go mow the lawn, man. And go take your vaccines and shut up. Leave the real work up to people like me. Rainwater and groundwater seeping in the cracks of the reactor buildings. The chairman of the Japanese nuclear regulator blames declining worker homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, moral for Fukushima leaks and problems. It's not because it's melted down and everything is just flowing out. No. Lack of morals. We all got a lack of morals. I got 13 likes. Holy shit, I'm doing wicked tonight. I'm appreciated. Should I be allowed to have 14 likes on my video after? I know that's like crazy talk, but that's crazy talk, Dana. It's true. Hang on here. 16,000 people quit the job November the 5th, 2000. So in 2013, he was complaining because blaming everything on the lack of declining workers' moral. Was the moral declining because people were dropping dead everywhere? Was that the most likely reason for this? The majority of the homeless on site at the Fukushima Daiichi are subcontracted and have no tenure or authority amongst the circles of TEPCO workers. Yeah, they're circling from outside the plant. Why are the subcontracted workers there? Because TEPCO does not want to unnecessarily expose their key on-site personnel to medusas. That makes sense. If you're a degenerate, disgusting, parasitic, pro-nuclear piece of shit, that makes perfect sense. Right now, human beings cannot even enter the reactor buildings. They never will. It's nuclear meltdowns, not reactor buildings anymore. Due to high radiation levels, so the intricate knowledge of the buildings is not as helpful as it will be down the road. Intricate knowledge of the buildings. If you took a nuclear engineer and a nuclear scientist and the Pope, and you brought them there and you try to, at gunpoint, try to get them to go into the building, they'll wrestle the gun away from you. They'll claw the eyes out of your head and beat you to death with the butt of the gun. And then they'll drop dead anyway, just like you already would. Like you can't get near the buildings without dropping dead. If you took a square foot of that rubble and put it in the wall of McDonald's, the biggest McDonald's you got on the planet, everybody in the McDonald's will die every 20 minutes for 1,000,000 years. Shame on this planet for throwing all the victims of society away. Currently, TEPCO is stuck in a holding pattern and using expendable, brings people who don't mind dying, shirts for the Trekkie fans. The expendables are the homeless, right? Subcontractor workers / homeless who are paid $11 a day, US. That's what they're making. Sent in to do the most dangerous work and now get blamed for all the mistakes. No, this is the coward of the industry, what you're talking about. The nuclear industry is the most cowardly industry you'll ever come across. There really isn't a bigger bunch of idiots and cowards and lunatic assholes on the planet. The people that seem to work in the nuclear industry are the worst humans conceivable. Currently, TEPCO is stuck in a holding pattern, using expendable, using the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, and then blaming them for mistakes. 16,000 of them ran away. They weren't workers. They were victims of the gangs and everything else that put them there in the first place. This week, TEPCO, which has no right to be on the site even for a second, confirmed that the reason why radioactive water leaked from the storage tanks, which are empty, by the way, is because TEPCO decided to purchase storage tanks which were not welded, rather bolted. These tanks the water you're pumping up has been poured over the melted reactor core full of fuel particulates. If you did try to put that through a pipeline, if you did put it in the tank, you can never get near the tank. You're talking about over 1 million seabirds in a tank. I've just betted that they acknowledge. It's true, though, the tanks were not welded. They were bolted in order to save time and money, because there was never an intention to put anything in the tank, despite what Rupert Winfield Hayes said that they had, because there was a big story showed up back then that they had discovered a giant aquifer under the site, which they still deny today. It's not unusual when I bring it up that they'll show in the comment section later and say, "You're a lawyer, Dana. There is no aquifer." No, we have the documentation. Why would I lie when I run an educational program? What's the point of that? Which were not welded, rather bolted in order to save time and money. Treated water release at Fukushima nuclear plant passes 2-year mark. Water tanks are dismantled. Rainwater, groundwater seeping into cracks of the reactor buildings. Rainwater and groundwater seeping into the cracks of the buildings. Yeah, I can see that. Why would you call it cracks, though? The buildings are completely gone. Telling the truth is like, if you waterboarded them 200 times, they still won't tell you the truth. Right? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he only lasted 189 times or something. Imagine drowning a guy 189 times. And not only did he confess to doing 911, he confessed to killing Elvis too. TEPCO and JFK and a whole bunch of people. TEPCO has taken countermeasures such as installing a barrier of frozen soil underneath the site, which doesn't work. I covered that earlier. And pumping groundwater from wells. So the water has to come through the site, and the wells are just randomly drilled over the site, and they have a little float switch. And when the switch rises up, that water gets pumped up automatically and goes into the tanks. That's what the tanks were built for. And they test the samples each time. Of course they don't. Of course they never will. And of course they've only ever found cesium. I don't find anything else. You're dealing with an industry that is so sadistic and so twisted that the fact that you're not gone to war against it is the biggest mistake this planet will ever make. Every politician, every celebrity, every superstar, every football, baseball, every celebrity, every rapper, everybody should go to work in this industry. This industry can't handle any pressure at all. They can't handle no pressure. Look what they're doing to me, for goodness sakes. I got 12 viewers and 13 likes still. The best on the best of the best information tonight. We're killing it tonight. It also paved the area to prevent rainwater from seeping into the ground. What they actually done was they sent in remote control bulldozers and the fuel pellets and the fuel assemblies and everything else that was blasted all over the site was eventually piled up into big holes by remote control bulldozers. And then they buried it. Then they had big cranes, the biggest cranes you can get, bringing in 16 feet wide by 32 feet long, steel, 1-inch steel plates that were welded together. And then they would lay them down with a magnet. They have a big giant magnet that they can turn on and turn off. They would pick it up, they would lay it, and if it wasn't right, they would pick it back up and lay it again. Nobody could stand up there. And these were 1-inch thick steel plates. Then they had the world's biggest cement truck. It spent months and months and months putting cement on top of the 1-inch thick steel plates all over the whole site, which was rusted, right? Because we got all these pictures over the years. Then they put cement over that, and then they put more steel plates there and more cement. That's how dangerous it was before the homeless stopped dropping everywhere. That's why 16,000 homeless ran away from that site, and appropriately so. You know, they had no choice. Science backs the safety claims. The scientific basis for the safety of the ocean discharge has been received understanding overseas. What's the scientific refuses to acknowledge the buildings are gone? Science backs safety claims. How can you suggest that science is saying that never happened and then expect us to believe the other side of your mouth too? A research group, including members from Fukushima University, the scum of the scum, announced in August that no accumulation of tritium, not even tritium-3H, man-made tritium is tritium-3H, not tritium, has been found in fish caught. Tritium, you get tritium that comes in the upper atmosphere. And pre-Fukushima, there's a total of around 1,100 kilograms on the entire planet. Between La Hague and France, the fuel reprocessing facility, Doneraigh, is it? I can't remember, in Scotland, the reprocessing site, and Windscale, which they changed the name after the nuclear meltdown to plutonium mixed oxide reactor in 1957, had tripled the total amount pre-Fukushima of tritium and replaced it 3 times with tritium-3H. And not just tritium-3H, all kinds of other isotopes from the fuel reprocessing facility in just 5 years. But only 2 grams got out, Dana, so clearly only 2 grams got out of that site. I'll agree with that. Holy crap. I'm not going to argue with scientists over that. I mean, clearly there's only 2 grams. And don't worry, because it's in 1,000 tanks. If I was telling you that story tonight, you would just call me a liar and move on, right? I'm pretty sure you would call me more things too. That you would move on. You're like, I don't listen, this guy's crazy. If I sat there all night, I might do that tomorrow night. Just that one picture, and I'm going to and get people to call in, oh no, it didn't. There's only 2 grams. That's in 1,000 tanks, Dana. And I'm not allowed to show you any documentation. Just got to sit there and listen to you. And just do it for badness. Everybody call in, and everybody repost a video all over the internet. And then the nuclear industry might give us all bonuses. I could use a bonus. I was hoping to go on a research expedition, but those dreams are falling apart. I don't know why I'm stupid enough to think that I could pull that off. But I'm trying. Levels of contamination on the site of Fukushima Daiichi soaring as typhoon slams Japan. Levels of contamination, radioactive emissions on the site at Fukushima nuclear wasteland. They're showing you a picture of tanks soaring as a typhoon slams Japan. You know, any idea how much water washed through the nuclear meltdown sites in the first number of years? Like, holy smokes, eh? Think of a typhoon washing through that. Think about the amount of rain we're talking about. Think about how much is going into the ocean. The whole country is radioactive, so think about how much radiation gets washed into the ocean in every typhoon. Because they got fuel particulates from the atomization all over the entire country and the planet, but the country is brutal. And what that means is all the leaves are radioactive, all the pollen is radioactive, all the dead branches falling off the trees are radioactive, and they get washed out into the ocean too, see? So you're always producing, because the fuel particulates are splitting atoms on top of that. They're neutron sources too, right? And so you got all these atoms being produced across the entire country, radiating everything around it. So when it rains, a lot of that gets washed out into the ocean because it's not breaking down. They don't have the biota, the fungus and the bacteria in the biota anymore. So the material's not even breaking down. That's why we have forest fires that are still out of control. Utility announced on Thursday, and like if you do the stuff I'm doing every day, and you don't snap and you don't lose your fucking mind once in a while, then there's something wrong. If you're watching this stuff every day and you don't snap and lose your fucking mind once in a while, there's something wrong. You are entitled to snap and lose your mind because the information we're talking about is catastrophic. The utility announced on Thursday that 140,000 atoms, a becquerel is a pulse of energy from an atom. So you need an atom to make a becquerel. 140,000 becquerels per liter of just beta-emitting radioactive substances were collected in a water sample from a ditch that runs into the Pacific Ocean. Per liter of just beta. Well, how can you have just beta without alphas and neutrons and gammas? Where's the science for that? You can't have one without all the others, by the way. On Tuesday, utility measured 59,000 atoms in water samples at the same location, 11 times greater than the 5,000 atoms reading taken on Monday. Again, it was probably 5 million or 50 million. That was the real numbers. Treated water released at Fukushima, the same story all night. A research group, including members from Fukushima University, the worst humans imaginable, unless they're UN, then they're even worse, announced in August that no accumulation of tritium have been found in fish caught 7 kilometers off the coastline. Tritium. It naturally exists in the ocean, so why are you talking about it? We're talking about anthropogenic man-made isotopes, not natural stuff, you piece of shit. September 27, 2011, reactor 2 core melted through the containment vessel. Workers lost a race to save one of the reactors. March 30, 2011. The story came out September 27, 2011. This was on Informable. March 30th. That's when the story originated. Workers lost a race to save one of the reactors. Well, reactor 2 was right between reactor 3 and 4, or 1 and 3. Heck, no workers are going near reactor 1 and 3, and you're definitely not going to go up the middle of it. The industry is insane. Let me show you a picture. But this industry is, the journalists are absolutely insane people. Reactor 2 is in the center. Reactor 1, fuel pool actually detonated. And reactor 3 right alongside of it detonated. Reactor 2 melted down, we know. The core went China syndrome. It burnt for days. The fuel pool and the reactor core of that building, we believe, went China syndrome. Whatever was left over after it burnt for several days straight. And it had a big hole in one of the big panels. These are huge buildings, 190-foot buildings. But it's the only building that looks kind of like it's intact, right? Leahy did add that there was no danger of a Chernobyl-style catastrophe. This is way worse than Chernobyl could ever hope to, in the worst-case scenario, it can be portrayed as, rather. These were massive reactors. These were pure uranium, pure plutonium. They had decades of reactor cores in the fuel pools. Chernobyl was a brand new reactor. It was 2 years old. It was a graphite reactor. It was a small reactor. And they sacrificed 1 million people. They jacked them off the street at gunpoint with buses by the hundreds of thousands. And he sent them in for 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and then they went home, never touched it, and then they got a little pension for the rest of their life, like $6 or something. I'm not kidding you, by the way. These reactors have had 8 to 9 reactor cores at the top of these buildings. They're gone. And each building, there's 4 buildings. You can't compare Chernobyl in any shape or form. And Chernobyl was brutal. It was brutal. Go back and watch my Chernobyl anniversary videos, for instance. Watch 2 of them, of the academic studies, and you'll see what they actually study. They study everything in the environment. There's nothing they don't study. Been doing it for 80 years. They study man-made elements more than the stuff from the solar system by many orders of magnitudes. Tritium naturally exists in the ocean. Whoever wrote that should be dragged into Fukushima Reactor 3. Leahy did add there was no dangers of a Chernobyl. Richard Leahy, who was the head of the safety research for boiling water reactors at General Electric, said there was no way that could happen, despite the fact that that's what happened. So here's General Electric being quoted as a representative, the head of the safety research for boiling water reactors, cutting your throats by saying this can't happen, and even though the fact that it did happen, and he knew it on day 5, or day 4, rather. That's such an important story. Leahy did add there was no dangers of a Chernobyl. The plant had been leaking. Isn't that leaking? These are catastrophic events. The person doing this, he died that day. 2 of them. 3 of them. They're spraying what's known as a reagent to bind with the fuel particulates so that they're not splitting the atoms into the local areas. So they're considered sacrifices. They're expected to die, and they do. They're not going to disappoint anybody. And when you give them a paper suit, you know they're meant to die. This is the plume of cesium-137 covering the entire planet. What part about this doesn't invoke urgent response from humanity? All the scientists turn their backs on you. You have no idea what the journalists, your favorite journalists and celebrities have done to you. They make you sick to your guts if you know. Back to the story. from today. Treated water released at Fukushima nuclear plant passes 2-year mark. 11 of the 1,046 tanks were dismantled. You can't dismantle a tank. I explained that earlier many times. Tritium naturally exists in the ocean, is routinely discharged from nuclear disease factors. They're two different atoms. One's man-made, the other one's natural. Both domestically, internationally, in fact, the tritium, they can't contain it. Everything is tritiated now anyway, all the water, fresh and salt on the planet, because of Fukushima's pulse event. But you got 1,000 fuel pools splitting atoms into your environment every day. That's probably the most terrifying sentence I could ever utter, or anybody could ever say. Is you got 1,000 fuel pools full of reactor cores, and then once the reactor core goes through a chain reaction, it never stops splitting atoms. Those releases are all day from 1,000 different points. It's a catastrophic event. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. Why aren't we fighting back? Why do I only got 15 likes? In fact, the tritium concentration less than 0.002% of World Health UN, the worst humans imaginable, maximum level for drinking water, an emergency of 10,000 atoms per liter. Why would you give a shit what they got? They got no authority over any country. They got no sovereignty over any country. They're not a regulatory agency. They can't compel, and they can't fine a company. They can't do anything. They're a corporation known as UN, formerly known as United Nations, as League of Nations. And after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they seen a chance to take over the planet, and they went for it. United Nations in 2023 said they're not a regulator and therefore not in a position to judge or approve Japan's water, soil, or anything else. And the World Health Organization is United Nations. They're no different than the International Atomic Energy Agency, IRPA, UNSCLEAR, the IPRC. They're all UN. And they're all meant to back each other up, and to the unsuspecting average person, the citizens, as they like to call them, they seem like a legitimate source, but they're not. It's like having 5 criminals, and they all got a company, a public relation company. And they always come out, all 5 of them will say, well, this media says that these people are criminals, but we checked into it and they're not. And then the next media comes out, they checked into it, no, they're not criminals. The next media comes out, but they're all the criminals, they're all the same people. And that's how they protect themselves every day. And then the only media fed to your typical consumer is those particular medias. And that's why the United Nations has 195 countries that are hypnotized into being stupid. And listen to this statement here. As an estimate by the University of Tokyo and others, which have studied how the discharge would change ocean tritium, not even tritium-3H, concentrations, suggest a maximum increase of 0.1% by 2019. That was Alexander Shithead, a project associate professor at the University of Tokyo. He's not a nuclear expert. Here he is. Currently at the University of Tokyo, that's him, with his bow tie. You can tell he's a prick. The day he was born, he was raised to be a prick. He said, I studied the past changes of Earth's climate. So what the fuck is he telling you about nuclear? And if he was right here, grab me that cheap fucking $30 bow tie I got there, and I'd put him up really close to my fucking face. And I said, you take a long, hard fucking suck on my arse, you sack of shit. And then I'd throw him in a wood chipper. My imaginary wood chipper, of course. The project associated bootlicking serial killer at the University of Shit for Brains, Tokyo. Said the impact on human health and the environment is negligible. How the fuck would you know anything about radiation? You study climate, Earth climate, literally the stupidest thing imaginable. So I guess he gets his grants now for his studies by doing that, right? Throw the whole entire planet under the bus, no expertise whatsoever. In regard to TEPCO's future approach to the treated water, a former visiting professor at Horsehead University, it is crucial to continue responsible disclosing data The fuck would you know about disclosing data, you piece of shit? How come they never show you any pictures? How come I got to show you all the fucking pictures? If they show you that, their story doesn't work, does it? So the impact on human health and the environment is negligible. But when you look at that, then you got to question that assertion, right? Worthless fucking scum. Workers lost the race to save one of the reactors, Reactor 2. Officials are hoping tanks at the complex will be able to hold the water, that new tanks can be trucked in. On Tuesday, officials from the Non-Nuclear Safety Commission, an expert panel on nuclear scumbags, said other possibilities, including digging a storage pit for the contaminated water, recycling it back into the reactors, or even pumping it into an offshore tanker. Recycling it back into the reactors. Instead, you just dump it straight into the ocean. The latest mishap came Tuesday when 3 workers trying to connect the pump of Unit 3 reactor with Medusa. Unit 3 is fucking frightening. They're connecting a pump, are they? Really? Were splashed by radioactive water that gushed from a pipe. From Medusa itself, really. I think people like that tells these lies, write these stories, minimum should do life in jail. And if there's a death penalty, then they should be qualified for it. These are serial killers of the worst magnitude. So you think they're connecting a pipe at Reactor 3, eh? Hey, George, bring over that adjustable. And though they were wearing suits meant to be waterproof and protect against high levels of radiation. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no such thing as a suit to protect you from high levels of radiation. It doesn't exist. It's not a fantasy, it's a blatant fucking lie. They quickly washed it off and we're not injured, because that's how radiation works. No, you got to get that fucking suit off and you got to get into decontamination and scrub yourself 15 times. They quickly washed it off and they were not injured. An official said. Nuclear safety official Hahiko Nishigayama said the men were soaked to their underwear. So it was on their body, then it was absorbed into their skin. Were soaked to their underwear. They fucking died. 40 photos from Fukushima Daiichi shows ground incapable of supporting equipment. TEPCO's attempting to trap the radiation underground with metal plates. Remember I talked about that earlier? They laid the plates on the ground, then they put cement over it, then they put pavement over that, then they put steel plates over that, then they put pavement over that, and cement on top of that, and plates on top of that. Because the homeless were dropping dead. There were 16,000 ran away at one point and that was the solution to get some of them back there. Not some of them back, but to get more to stay there long enough they didn't just drop dead and scare everybody away. It turned out to be true that the water vapors was splashing, erupting from underground. It wasn't splashing, erupting. They measured 4.7 sieverts where it was 4.0 sieverts. Like fucking, that's a lethal dose right away. Your organs will melt in proximity to it. In October the 13th, 2011. It is located at the southeast side of Reactor 1. The southeast fucking side, eh? That's the China syndrome, right? That was the reactor core from reactor. The fuel pump was ejected out of the building. It atomized an aerosol and was dispersed right out of the building. We believe the reactor core, some of it during that explosion, was ejected down into the ground where the China syndrome took, so-called China syndrome, where it basically means it's just burning down into the ground. And so everything that is consuming at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it's atomizing and ionizing and radiating and aerosoling. And that is radioactive fuel particulates being released directly into the environment. And those particulates now are splitting atoms till the end of time. It's the worst case scenario. In every direction you look is the worst case scenario. It's assumed the melted fuel rods are sinking deep underground, which has caused it was coming out of the ground. The steam coming out of the ground was lethal doses, not You didn't have to breathe it in, you just had to be in proximity to it, and it would melt your human's organs. And they would squat down and excrete their melted organs, and then they would fall over and die with their pants to their knees, like at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It is assumed that the melted fuel rods are sinking deep underground, which is called a China syndrome. It's called a nuclear meltdown, is what it's actually called. But a China syndrome just sounds cool. It sounds cool, see? August the 14th, 2012, more contaminated water found leaking at Fukushima. See these hoses? If that's radioactive water, you can't get there and take that picture. That's a lethal dose. The turbine, and you're not getting into turbine buildings because you had the fuel assemblies go right down through the roof of it. Of the Unit 4 turbine building, the source of the water was traced back to a pipe carries contaminated water from reactor 3 to a temporary storage facility. The water was found to have contained, you'll love this one, 75,000 becquerels, atoms, per milliliter of radioactive cesium, per milliliter. There's 1,000 milliliters in a liter. A milliliter is 1,000th of a liter. These are absurd numbers. Which is 75,000 per liter, 75 million atoms per liter. And 300 million atoms, times 1,000. And per gallon is 300 million atoms per gallon. Of just cesium, you can't just have cesium-137. It just simply doesn't work that way. The water was found to contain over 75,000 atoms, which is what a becquerel is. A becquerel, rather, is the pulse of energy from an atom. You need 75,000 atoms per milliliter of radioactive cesium. Man, oh man, oh man. These are absurd numbers. 75 million per liter. But only 2 grams got out, Dana. Oh, okay. You're right. My bad. Japan to use non-existent American technology to remediate the contaminated hazmat suits at Fukushima. You ever heard that story? Most of these stories you probably never heard before. We're doing tonight the second half. Japan to use non-existent, stuff that doesn't exist, American technology. So they're using technology that doesn't exist to remediate contaminated hazmat suits. You know, the paper suits, right? Over 5,000 so-called rubberized, these are not rubberized contaminated suits. We know the suits. Are used daily by cleanup workers. You can't reuse a suit even if it was rubberized. You can't decontaminate a suit. By cleanup crews working in the facility. These are not cleanup crews. These are the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. Last Friday, Vision Plasma Systems stock tanked after a record number of over 300 million shares were traded on Thursday before the news of the agreement with Cell Runner Incorporation was announced. So serious stock manipulation. On Thursday and Friday alone, if traders timed their actions perfectly, they potentially, and they did, they potentially could have doubled their investments. But the technology doesn't work. You can't filter, you can't clean the suits. Right? So they pushed the stocks out that were worthless and turned them into coin, sold their shares, and walked away with the unsuspecting investors' profits. Another financial analyst website, Hot Stock, noted the company hasn't announced any financing, so how could they even manufacture those units in a bit of a mystery? Well, the units don't exist, they still don't exist. But who cares? They made a fortune. 300 million shares were traded. That's not insider trading at all. Allegedly built inside of 2 ISO 40-foot metal containers. The units claim to be capable of converting up to 5 tons per day of hazardous waste and other matters into sign gas, net electricity, recyclable metal ignites without any air emissions or ash from the gasification process. Wow, yeah, really. Which simply didn't turn out to be a complete fabrication. But he sold 300 million shares with no financing. The Arc Master 1 is normally started on diesel and then self-powered after about 30 minutes of operation by using the gas created by the plasma gasification. It turned out it's simply not true. Japan admits another case of withholding reliable important information for the public. The radiation levels are far in excess of the emergency limits, and in less than 8 hours, residents in some of the most affected areas has already exceeded the average amount that a citizen would expect to receive in a whole year. Like these are the ramblings of a lunatic. Of a lunatic asshole, actually, to be exact. Do you think the nuclear industry's lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of the Fukushima reactors? Well, we got 16 people. We're killing it now. La 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 da 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 da. The radiation levels were far in excess of the emergency limits. In less than 8 hours, residents of some of the most affected areas had already exceeded the average amount that a citizen would expect to receive in a whole year. It took them 8 hours. These are totally different types of radiation. One is lethal, the other one's not. The industry is just disgusting. We're going to do part 2 tomorrow night. And we got a whole bunch of other stuff to cover, right? The tanks. So that we have 2 fresh videos about the tanks out there circulating. Because right now we're doing pretty darn good. We got 16 people. Like a fucking miracle. The industry can't touch us now. We're special. So special. Don't fail off, Metro. Jeremy Laporte. Well, there you go. That's what we done. We did it. We done did it. We did done. We did done did it done did it. Ooh. I think we're in luck here tonight. I love it. I love the fact that I don't know how the hell he does it, but I love the fact that James is busy. You got a fresh video. We're going to play that as a closer. It's the last chance to give me a thumbs up. Pretty extraordinary night tonight of thumbs up. We've done pretty good. We got 16, which is amazing. I'm very grateful. I'm awestruck that we able to get that many thumbs up. I mean, you know, if you work really hard for a decade, you might be able to get 16 thumbs up too. I'm not saying you will, but you might. And 16 people, that's crazy, eh? On this little old show we've been doing for a lousy decade. 5 days a week. Huh. 19 votes in your face, nuclear industry. Do you think the nuclear industry is a lunatic assholes to claim only 2 grams got out of the Fukushima reactor? Didn't take me long to get a thumbs down on that video, I'll tell you what. James got an interesting looking video there. The Nuclear Vantage. And you can watch, he's got over 400 videos, folks. I recommend that video. We're going to play it, actually. James got so much you can't keep up with it sometimes. The Yellow Cake Mule, we only played that once last night. The Stranding of the Flirt. The Radioactive Shrimp, it was an amazing video. I'm just going to point out a few of my favorite recent ones. They're Still Lying to You About Nuclear. Love that. I love all of those videos. I love them all, but I mean, if you never listen to his music, you go listen to those videos, and you don't get addicted. You're not very honest. Here we go. The Nuclear Vantage. I'm looking forward to this. He's the closer for the show tonight. Have a great night. Tomorrow is Thursday. See everybody tomorrow night for another nuclear asshole, idiotic asshole, lunatic asshole, I'm sorry.
They wrote, safe, reliable. That's the cover story. This is the record. 65 years without a problem. Fukushima still out of containment. Core debris unaccounted for. Communities still inside exclusion zones. From their vantage, nuclear energy is clean. From the ground, Fukushima never ended. Renewables cannot scale, but nuclear scales only cost. Budgets collapse, schedules abandoned, waste without storage, shifted from one warehouse to another. France and Ontario displayed a success, while their fleets endure chronic failure. They cite opinion polls as if approval contains radiation. They print certainty in journals, but repositories remain theoretical. From their vantage, nuclear energy is clean. From the ground, Fukushima never ended. They insist facts, not fear. But the facts they omit define them. Containment breached. No timeline for recovery. Operational control lost.